Good morning and afternoon, everyone. We'll give a minute or so for folks to start trickling in here, and then we'll get underway.
Alrighty, I'm going to be mindful of everybody's time, so we'll get the show on the road here. Welcome. This is the kind of the first step in the training pathway that we have with Tallyfor. This is the intro to Tallyfor Balance. Couple housekeeping notes. If questions come up, pop those into the Q&A as they come to mind. I will make a point of leaving some time at the end to work through them to the as best we can. Also, this is, as I mentioned, part one. We're going to really touch on kind of some of the high level stuff, right? We want you to be comfortable in the product after this, but we also do have a follow on to the intro. We call that the deep dive for Tallyfor Balance. And that'll definitely go a layer deeper. So we encourage everybody who's joining us today to also check that out. Both of these webinars are running on a weekly basis right now. So the whole purpose of Tallyfor is really to protect your capacity during busy season. So whether that's through the use of the software and things that we can do through integrations, automations, and the like, or whether it's through best practices around how and when you use the software and how you plan to deploy it in advance of tax season. We all want that kind of pointed in the same direction, protecting that capacity when it's so scarce and valuable. So today, what we're going to hit on is the kind of account setup, right? Again, basically knowing what is where, navigating to the different portions of the software for anybody who's brand new, highlighting a few things about getting your team invited. Then we want to go over, kind of all the key points of the Tallyfor UI. So we'll work through the mapping and grouping, the adjustments, the report outputs, as well as the tax file output. I'll wrap up with some best practices and resources. And as I mentioned at that point, I'll come back to everybody's questions. So let's go ahead and jump in Tallyfor. I'm going to go ahead and log in. Alrighty, so if you're a brand new user and you land on this screen for the first time, you are just going to see a single demo client, right? If your firm has been working in Tallyfor, this is where that client list will be building. What we have here is, we really kind of organize this in the same manner as your tax software does, where we have, client objects that we list in here. And then nested underneath each client, we have a series of binders. So let's go ahead and create a client and get started from scratch here. I'm just going to do a simple 1120S. Client is created. And I'm going to go back in time to 2022 and work on one of those binders. First time you work on a client in here, you're only going to have the option to create a binder in this new empty state. Reason being is everything in here is going to really be driven off of the trial balance data that we bring in. That's your inputs are sitting here in the menu. And there's really three types in here. There are direct connections via API with Xero, QBO, and FreshBooks. There are what we would call bespoke imports, where you simply retrieve a file from another system and import it in here. So that's available for QuickBooks, this QBD tab. You can do that with both desktop and online. So just follow the instructions, grab those reports and put them in here. The others function the same way. And then this Excel option is the one kind of free form option that you have. Please note this is also your option for getting an import in straight from Zero if you don't have the ability to connect. So this takes the format essentially of Zero's trial balance report. But we also use it as the tool to give you a free form format to just populate a trial balance file and import it in here. Because I always get caught with multi-factor when I'm in webinars. So I'm going to go ahead and use one of those today. And actually, before I do it, I'll just give you a quick peek. All right, we can see, and you'll see in the resource that's linked there where it says how to import, some best practices for putting this together, some requirements. Right, this is sort of a best case scenario where I have all the account codes and account types populated, but you do have some flexibility. So let's get it in here. Now, it's one of the first things that we want to give to the user in Tallyfor is a level of standardization. So regardless of which one of these input sources that I use, your starting point with the trial balance in Tallyfor is always going to look like this. So I have everything is unmapped, noted by both the exclamation point there, as well as the tax category dropdown telling me to select a tax category. And when you're in here, pairing a return, there's really two kind of buckets of actions that you're going to do to get this, trial balance in a condition to where you're ready to take the adjusted tax balances and put those into the tax form. So one bucket is all your mapping and grouping, and there's I would say 4 real tools here in the UI that you're going to use for those purposes. You have this drop down, and you can search by either the name or number. And I think I can see him on the call. Thank you, Troy, for that suggestion. This is much easier for me as well. You can, you map a single account, you want another one in the same mapping, simply drag and drop. And, let's just get all these mapped. All right, and I'll touch on that. And so what I've done here, right, is I've started the process of building out these work papers. And this is actually a good time to highlight, because it helps me demo this better as well. Your browser gives you quite a bit of flexibility to create sort of your ideal workspace. I do this when I work in Tallyfor, or when I demo as well. And what did I do? I basically just opened up another window with the same ATB, and I go split screen on it. And I also like this because it lets me kind of show you what's going on here as you work in the preparation tab. So little UI hack there for you, as well as let's see how this is really playing out in real time. So another thing to note is when you're working in here, right, I can kind of navigate by tabbing around the screen. This is particularly helpful. I find it especially so in the expenses, where you have a lot of these single lines that can get mapped. So what you can do is tab through this interface, hit enter to open the drop down. You can hit escape if you want to close it, and then simply find your option, your tax category, hit enter, and it'll map it. So once you get kind of humming with that, I find it to be particularly useful, especially if you know the line names or line numbers, because then you're just punching in a couple numbers on each of those. So, right, I've been moving through that. My work papers are building out underneath. And everything I've done up to this point, it's really been just, I'm trying to get a number into a box. And if you note on the right-hand side here in my income statement, everything is listed, it's spelled out in proper caps or proper case, right? First letter capitalized, the rest lowercase. Now let's go over to the left here, and I'm going to grab these. And in this interface, you can, grab one, hold shift, click again, and select a range. So this is one, your way to kind of do a multi-select in here. But I'm going to map this to box 12 on the form. And in the dropdown in Tallyfor, you'll note that the category is spelled out in all caps. That is us telling you, the user, that this is an attached statement you're working with here. Why is that of consequence? Well, with the attached statements, we're going to not just simply put this 52,000 number right here in box 12. What we're actually going to do is write 3 lines into the subschedule or attached statement, and your tax software actually totals that up and puts that number in there. So we're going a layer of detail deeper on these. And that's where oftentimes these tax labels come into play. Right. I bet you most users in our system, they were presented with accounts named like that. They would likely put some tax labels on them. And now this becomes what shows on your work papers. That's what's going to flow into the form when you import the Tallyfor tax file. And you can do that right anywhere you see one of those tags. The other tool for working with the your attached statements, right, is our grouping. So we can see right now I can't select this, hit this button. Once I start selecting accounts, though, it gives me this option. You also, right, if I wanted to unselect all of them, that's where the guy is right there. So what I did is I first selected the accounts. I created a group. I'm going to name it. And now I will map it. Now let's peek over here on the right-hand side, down at the bottom where I have those, accounts mapped to line 19. And we can see that they're nested under the office expenses group. So this is your detailed view here, right? That's what's going to be imported into the tax form. So what we see here, just in this little section, is kind of an illustration of those 4 different tools. Right. To start, I did just the mapping. Right. I used drag and drop to do to map into multiple, or to bring multiple accounts right into gross receipts. I then kind of showed how you can do some of the faster one-off mapping. Then we did a multi-select for these and renamed them. And then this right here is our illustration of grouping. Now, everything that I just did in that UI is also available for use in bulk. Before I jump into that, right, the thing that I'm going to use is this templating and additional integrations that is in your settings. While you're there, if you're turning this on, also note that you can set a default accounting product and client basis, save the team some mouse clicks. But since I have that on, what I can do is, let's take us back to square one. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the very beginning of the process. So let's bring that trial balance back in. And let's kind of do the same stuff that I was doing, but in a bulk format. So what this templating does is it takes a chart of accounts, right? And really the most important thing that we're looking for is an account number. So, increasingly we see firms realize, actually, hey, if all I need is those account numbers to be consistent, I might actually have the ability to, implement something like this a little more broadly across the book of business. We also see folks using this when they have really long trial balances. Right, this is a way to essentially do all of this through Excel. And really all that we're looking for is an account number and the line number. And this is the same line number that you would see displayed in the dropdown in Tallyfor. So you could actually use that as a key when filling this out. This column right here is where you can do all of your grouping. So you simply, have group names, populate multiple rows with that group name in here, and the system will group those upon import. So let's apply it, right? And we can see it. Basically, anything that's included in the template, it picks up, maps it accordingly. Anything that's not, it flags it. And quite frankly, this is also what a roll forward looks like in here, right? Is that when you roll forward, you have a set of mappings, right, that you've already created. You import a new trial balance into it, right? All the mappings that are relevant are applied, and anything that is maybe new year over year also gets presented like this. So the template is also helpful in kind of fast forwarding us through this process and moving us over into adjustments. So I am just going to, for expedience, pop those over on other deductions. And now I'm at a point where let's transition over onto the adjustment side. Right, so everything we're doing in the mapping grouping was really, it's through this interface, or it's through this tab, or through the templates. Right, with adjustments, you have your trusty little JE panel hanging out over here on the side. And I'd assume that, right, doing a journal between the accounts that you're looking at on the screen, that's pretty self-explanatory. But there's also an added layer here where if you need to create an account that you can make an adjustment to, because you're trying to map to something on the tax form that's not, necessarily present here, you'd utilize these tax only accounts. So one of the most common adjustments that we see folks do is, right, adjusting out officers comp. So you use a payroll system, it doesn't break it out. Everything comes across in one account in the trial balance. So you create the officer's comp account, map it, and then let's make a quick adjustment. Let's see. That was too much. All right, and when you're doing that, anywhere you see a pencil in Tallyfor, so right, J name, the memo, those are yours to play with. And obviously I could be doing a book, a reclass, or a tax JE in here. And if you make one erroneously, you can delete it. Right, and that's a pretty simple instance. You also in here are going to have some bits of automation when it comes to like basic M1 adjustments. So there's one in for meals, there's one for non-taxable income, non-deductible expenses, right? Good example would be PPP right here. So if I just open this guy up, and so this is an instance where I have an account on the books that I want off the return, plain and simple. All right, so I want to basically peel this thing off the face of the return and get it into my M1 schedule. So just map it like you do the other accounts. All right, and the system will queue up a tax adjustment here. And then your work papers are going to show, right, this essentially falling off the return, right? There's the adjustment. Here's where it lands on the M1. And when you're, coming back through here, right, if you click on any of these accounts, right, we can see that basically the JE is right here. At the end of this process, you're presumably going to have your return map, your adjustments made. right? And it's going to be time to move into the tax form. So really, two things are going to come out of here. You have reports, so they can be downloaded in a group or individually, depending on the use case. So, right, you might need to filter, just pull book J's down here, give them to a bookkeeper. You may need to grab all the reports, keep them for your records. So the work papers, you're going to be able to pull out of here, and then you're going to get a file to put into the tax form. Mine is set up for ProConnect today, so let's go ahead and do one real quick. Right. So the real premise here, and it's whether it's ProConnect or any of the other softwares, right? It's you're working in Tallyfor, you complete your work, you pull down a file, and then you want to go into that same client's return in your tax software. Come on, folks. And while it's doing its thing, every tax software is going to have a little tooltip right here. Right. And pretty much aside from Drake, really, every tax software has some type of initial setup. With ProConnect, it's getting this extension installed. With Lacert, the CCH systems, UltraTax. What you are going to need to do is there's the first time mapping exercise. They all take about a minute or so, but they are steps that you have to take to get yourself in a position where you can simply finish up the work in Tallyfor, pull down the file, and then jump into the right place in your tax software. So it's always going to be in the return. Right? In ProConnect, I need to get into this input return screen. In all the other systems, you basically get into the return, and then there's an import dialog or an import option in the menu, and you run through that wizard. But with all of them, you're going to basically take the file that you produced, load it into the system accordingly. And actually, this is all the legacy systems. It's just a very quick Excel import. With ProConnect, our little robot extension actually goes through it and punches everything in. And at the end of this process, let's let the robot finish up. And, for reference, I'm not going to, there we go. Right. So I didn't necessarily run the timer, but you can kind of, again, see the length of the return here. And really the amount of time is proportional to, the amount of data, the number of boxes and fields that you're filling out. Right. And at that point, what you're getting from, let's go in here, right? Look at my ordinary income. Right. And we can see that. And you would obviously have prior year amounts in your pro forma return. One thing to note here is, and every tax software has this where there's what we call convenience fields. So like, obviously there's no line for answering service on the tax form. Right. What we're going to write into is all the boxes that exist on the tax form. And then at the end of all of this, right, this structure, everything that you've done in this return is going to be included in your roll forward. So I did a 2022 binder right now. Next year, I will be able to roll that forward. And then when I grab my New Year's trial balance, let's see. Right, the numbers are going to fall into place. And ideally, when you do a rollover, you should just need to right? Map any accounts that are new year over year. Get rid of any of these JEs that are, that you're not going to use in this particular year. Populate the repeating ones and then make any new adjustments. And to kind of put a bow on that, let's sort of wrap up these and leave some time for questions. It's very common for us to, in fact, most of the activity that's occurring in this product, in the Tallyfor Balance product right now, are actually firms that are recreating 2022 returns in anticipation of having those ready to roll forward once they get into busy season. So kind of a very common best practice for folks that want to do that, right? They look at their client base, immediately break out on-time filers versus extensions, look at those on-time filers, right? And figure out a way to prioritize those based on kind of their own needs. We see folks attack it from both directions, right? Some just start taking the easiest clients and kind of get those set up in here ahead of time, knowing that they'll offload a bunch of the prep work or get it done ahead of the busy season compression. Alternatively, some folks start working on the trickiest clients first, right? Just wanting to, again, get this portion of the tax prep done well in advance of when the engagement's, live. Another thing that, we'll repeatedly hear from customers that brings a good amount of benefit to this is they'll create, standardized grouping names for all their attached statements, so that folks that are, both on the prep and review side are kind of always looking at the same, grouping methodology. Some do it across their entire client base, right? Some might do it by industry if their book of business is organized that way. But that's another way to kind of squeeze the benefits of standardization out of this. And then lastly, the folks that are able to leverage standardized COAs, whether that's, some do it on the write-up clients, some just do it on Schedule Cs and Es, but right, they find places to employ the templates that I showed. And obviously that has huge benefits in terms of their efficiencies. So if you haven't already, jump in, get a free account. If your firm already has one, make sure your admin invites you. For all the trialists, you've got some free returns in there. And then for anybody who's new, if your team is already on Tallyfor and you're kind of getting up to speed, again, recreating a 2022 return in here and even having kind of an actual official filed with the IRS tax return to tie back to is a really good exercise. So it's a good way to get yourself, get a little bit of work done in advance and also kind of get your chops. As I mentioned, we've got the other, step 2 of our training running Thursdays. Join us for that. Every new customer gets a live training session with their team. We often, across the board, we find that that's best, get into the intro, get into the deep dive, get some time under your belt in the product, and then get a live training session where we really can get, into the nitty gritty of the accounting systems that you use, your tax system, your client types, and help you really round out, your knowledge of the system as well as the workflow and SLA that you're putting in place. Videos, we're always trying to find more content. So our YouTube page is slowly but surely getting more and more content. And then lastly, we're here. We know that, we can provide some training and some self-service stuff, but your questions are going to come up invariably. So our whole team watches that support line, and we're literally meeting daily to address anything that is open on our end. So that all said, and then lastly, binders, the way that we price it is based on your binder usage. Base plan gets you 25 returns. You can add them on as you go from there. And then if you're a firm that's doing, more than 200 returns, give us a shout and you can get a volume discount for pre-purchasing. So that all said, any questions that I can tackle? And also feel free. I believe everybody on this has a direct line into me individually, or at the very least into support. So if there's something that you want to push through that channel, feel free to do so as well. But I'll hang out for a few minutes here to tackle any questions that come up. Thank you, Troy. And if we don't have questions, I thank everybody for carving out some time for us and let us know how we help. How we can help. We're, here to hopefully make your tax season a lot easier. All righty. Take care, everybody.